In Chapter 2, we're going to talk a lot about the food and fiber system. What is the food and fiber system? What are some of the trends that are going on with the food and fiber system, as well as some of the statistics that's surrounding the food and fiber system? Well, one of the ways in economics that we calculate trends is through the use of indices. Well, what is an indice? An indice is basically a percentage comparison from a fixed point of reference or benchmark. And what we use indices for is indices are used to show trends in aspects such as output, productivity, and prices. Well, what does this percentage comparison from a fixed point of reference or benchmark mean? What we're basically going to be doing is we are going to be comparing statistics from one year to a base year. We're going to be comparing everything back to a base year and calculating that on a percentage aspect. So now we get into what we know as our base year. And this is what we are comparing all other years to. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, how did 2015 compare to a time such as, say, the year 2000? Or how did the prices from 2010 compare to the prices of, say, the year 2000, or something of that nature? And what we do whenever we're calculating these indices is we're coming up with a base year. What are we comparing everything to? So this base year then becomes your benchmark. This is known as your benchmark. And this base year, this benchmark is always equal to 1 or 100%. And a little bit later we'll get into why that is. So remember that we're comparing everything on a percentage comparison. We're comparing everything back in a percentage aspect. So that 1 year, that base year, must equal 100%. And as we know, 100% is just equal to 1. So it's just a matter of how you classify it. So then whenever we get into calculating these indices, we say, well, what should be our base year? What is the base year? We have, say, 60 different years from 1960 to 1920, for example, or sorry, 2020. Have 60 years there. What should be our base year among all 60 of those years? Well, we've got to ask ourselves, what are we trying to compare all the numbers to? Are we trying to compare it to the year 1990? Are we trying to compare it to the year 2000? Or what year are we trying to compare it to? And that's going to be our base year. And here's the interesting part about it. It's arbitrarily chosen, meaning it's not really chosen using a specific manner, but you can pretty much choose any year. You're just basically going to compare everything back to a single year, so you can choose any of those years to compare it to. So two common indices that we might see in agriculture might be output index and then the price index. So whenever we're calculating the output index, what we're doing is we're comparing or taking the production of 1 year divided by the production of the base year. So what we're doing is we're going to come up with a percent of how well did this 1 year do as compared to the base year. So let's see kind of what that looks like. So let's say we say that our base year is going to be the year 2000. Year 2000 is our base year. And we can see right off the bat that with this being our base year, we have that index is equal to 1. So what we are doing is we're comparing 1995, 2005, 2010, and then 2015 back to this base production. We are going to compare everything back to this base production. So whenever we do that, as we can see, the formula is equal to production of 1 year divided by the production of the base year. Let's go ahead and see how that works out. So if we bring up a calculator, and we go through this, and we're going to compare the production from 1995 to the production of the year 2000. So we say production of 1 year divided by the production of the base year. So we say we got 155,292 million pounds of milk was produced in 1995. We divide that number by the base year, by that base production, so that's 167,393. We see that that percentage, that index, comes out to be approximately 0.93, or 93%. So what does this mean? In the year 1995, we produced 93% of the amount that we would have produced, or that we will produce in the year 2000. Or if we look at it another way, we produced 7% less in 1995 as we did in the year 2000. So this index is saying how much did we produce in comparison to the base year. So let's do another example. Well, let's figure out what would be our price index from the year 2010. So in the year 2010, we produced 192,848 million pounds of milk. We take that number, that year, and we compare it back to that base year, and we come up with, take that number divided by 167,393. We see that our index is equal to 1.15. Well, if we put that in percentage format, we're going to just take that number to multiply it by 100. We see that that percentage is equal to 115. So what does that mean? It means we have produced 115% in the year 2010 than what we did in the year 2000. Meaning we produced 15% more million pounds of milk in the year 2010 as compared to the year 2000. And then you can do that for all of these numbers and get all of these indexes. So I mentioned earlier that the price index of the base year is always equal to 1. Well, why is that? Well, if we're comparing that year to itself, so we take the same formula and we take the milk production in that base year, or we take the milk production from 2000 divided by the milk production from the base year, which is 2000, it's going to always equal to 1. We're just taking the number dividing by itself. Simple math. So that base year is always going to be equal to 1. And then if we want to transfer that into a percentage format, as I've talked about a little bit, we're just going to take that number times 100. It's going to come up with our 100%, which is exactly what we see right here with it saying equal to 1 or 100%. So how can we use these indices to show trends? Well, let's look at the milk production. And these are a lot of numbers, and we can see that they're trending upwards, that they're increasing. That makes sense. But if we look over here and we look at the price indexes, we can say that from 1995 to the year 2000, the production of milk has increased by 7%. From the year 2000 to 2005, it's increased by 6%. From 2005 to 2010, it's increased by another 9%. So if we go from 2010 to 2015, if we see here, it's increased by another 10%. So we're saying over the course of 5 years, milk production has been increasing on an average of 8 or 9%. So that gives us a good way to kind of predict what milk production might be in the future. So we're using these indices to show trends in percentage format for the milk production. Now another common index that we might see in agriculture is the price index. And the price index is we're comparing the price of a good in 1 year to the price of a good in the base year. And we're putting it in percentage format. And all we're doing is doing a percentage comparison of 1 year to a fixed point or a benchmark. So let's go ahead and do some of the equations on that and see how that kind of comes up as well. So if we do a price index, and we're going to compare everything back to the year 2000, just like we did before. We see that 2000 is our base year. The base price would have been $12.32 per hundredweight on that milk. And we see that our price index is equal to 1, which is exactly what we'd expect given what we already know. So let's compare, let's say the milk from 1995, the price of milk, to the price of milk in the year 2000. So we take a price of $12.74 divided by the price of milk in the base year of $12.32. And we see that that price index comes out to be 1.03, meaning that milk prices were 3% higher in the year 1995. Well, let's compare the price of milk in, say, the year 2005. The price of milk in the year 2005 was $1.23 per hundredweight. We compare that, or sorry, it wasn't $1.23. It would have been $15.13. We compare that back to the price of the milk in the base year, which was $12.32. We see that in the year 2005, milk prices were approximately 1.23 as our index, or 23% higher than what it was in the year 2000. So we could go through and calculate all of these indices. And you can do it for anything using the same format of let's find the base year and compare everything, all the other years back to the base year. So now that we know how to calculate it, let's look at what the price index is telling us. What the price index is telling us is that overall, the price of milk is trending upwards. We see that it took a dip from 1995 to 2000, and the price of milk fell by 3%. But yet, by the time it reached 2005, it increased by 23%. 2010, it increased by 32% to 32%, so an 8% increase or 9% increase over the year 2005. And then going from 2010 to 2015, it increased by another 7%. So we can look at this and say, well, the price of milk took a dip between 1995 and 2000, but overall is trending upwards. So now we can use these indices to show trends in the agricultural world.